Okay, let's go ahead and open in prayer. Holy Abba Father, blessed be your name. May your name be praised and glorified for not only all eternity, Abba, but let every human being that is ever to come to know your name call on your name, because it is the most holy. Holy Abba Father, we bless you and we thank you for your Son, Yeshua HaMashiach, who at this time of the year gave his life as a sacrifice, as a redemption for us, Abba, who we did not deserve, but you called us out of this world to his glorious light, that there we might be set free, for he is free indeed. We are free to worship you. We are free to call on your name. We are free to be blessed by you, Abba, and your goodness, even though, Abba, many times we fall so short of what we're supposed to be doing. Help us with our weaknesses. Help us, Abba, when we fall so far short and we don't hit that mark. And help us, Abba, especially in the times when we know that we're not hitting that mark and we get into an attitude and we decide we are just simply not going to cooperate. Help us with that revolting attitude that we have that comes from the flesh, Abba. Help us to learn how to crucify the flesh. Help us, Abba, as your word says, Yeshua learned obedience through the things that he suffered. Help us, Abba. Help us to understand and recognize when you are chastising us that we, Abba, have a moral responsibility to the covenant that we signed the dotted line and we said we give you full authority over our lives and that we are slaves to your righteousness. Help us not to forget that, Abba, especially during this time of the year when we're supposed to be examining ourselves leading up to the Passover for the renewing of that contract, Abba. Help us all to be a committee of one, to be thoroughly and completely honest with ourselves and honest with you about where we are in this faith at this given time. And let us make the right decision, Abba, that we can boldly stand before you and say, here I am. I have done what you have asked, and I have given you full authority over my life. I am your sacrifice. Help us to say that with a clear conscience. And if we don't have a clear conscience, Abba, speak to us and convict us and take our garments that are so filthy in that state of mind and cleanse it as white as snow, Abba, that we may be righteous, that we may be a true reflection of Yeshua, who is also a true reflection of you. We bless you and we thank you for the liberating power of your word, your spirit, and his blood, in Yeshua's mighty name. Amen. Amen. So today's message, I was going to give a different message, and being that Passover is coming up next week, I felt like Yahweh really put it heavy on my heart to do as I generally do each year, which is to speak about preparing for the Passover. And the title of message today is called Examining Yourself, a Pre-Passover Exercise in Honesty. A Pre-Passover Exercise in Honesty. Over the 35 years that I've been in this faith, I've seen people that are honest and dishonest. And in particular, in the last year, I've watched a whole slew of people almost simultaneously choreographing together, doing a lot of things that are dishonest. And I downright will just say that that is just plain evil. And if you are dishonest, you don't belong in the body of Messiah, and you should get the hell out. You're in the wrong place, just to be blunt about it. And it grieves my heart to see people being so dishonest about so many different things. But then at the same time, Yahweh is speaking to me and saying, mercy is one of the weightier matters of the law. The question becomes one of, where do you draw the line between people who are acting dishonestly and having mercy? And Yahweh says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. And Gabriella said it earlier that Yahweh is mysterious. He has his own reasons for why he does what he does when he does it. And sometimes we don't have the answers to that. But this last year has been troubling to me because of all the dishonesty in which people are not willing to stand up and say, I have been guilty of such and such. And yet, they will go and they will take the cup of judgment, they will drink the blood, and they will take of the broken body of the matzah in symbolism, and they will boldly stand there and say, I of a clean heart will do this thing. And boy, does that scare me when I see that. Because you know what that says to me? What it says to me is that person has no fear of Yahweh whatsoever. They are arrogant, they are belligerent, they are self-willed, self-determined to do whatever they want to do, what they want to do, when they want to do it. Ain't nobody I got to be accountable to, not even Yahweh. How can you go to Passover in that state of mind? So the point of this message is today is please be honest with yourself. There was one year in my 35 years that I knew I was in trouble. And I purposely did not take of the first Passover. Because in my heart, I knew I would eat and drink judgment to myself. And I had enough fear to not transgress his blood on the Passover. And so I waited for the second Passover and got my keister straightened out. And if I wasn't going to get myself straightened out by then, I'll wait another year. Now I know that's controversial for some people. But the bottom line is we're going to look at what happens when you decide in that state of mind you're going to do this anyway. Just so that everybody else can see you sat at the table. Oh, jeez. Let's start off in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 23. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 23. And it says, For I have received from the Master that which I also delivered to you, that the Master Yahshua, on the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread. And that word bread, and that's another controversial thing in the Hebraic roots, the word is artus in the Greek. And the word artus means showbread. And in my book, showbread is always unleavened. And we got Torah teachers that are trying to tell people that on the night of the Last Supper, which wasn't just the Last Supper, it was the last Passover supper. And I have a 4-part teaching on why the Passover was the Last Supper and vice versa. And it's about 6 hours of in-depth detail going through step by step, moment by moment, to prove the case that these Torah teachers are absolutely wrong. And so this showbread was unleavened. It was not leavened. It was not a loaf of bread. And let's move on in verse 24. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, Take, eat. This is my body, which is broken. And it's interesting in the Greek, it says, broken with a humbled mind. That's what that word means. The word broken means broken with a humble mind. So Yahshua is saying that what he was doing, he did it in a state of a broken mind. And the whole thrust of this message today is, as I stated from the beginning, is I'm tired of watching people not have a broken mind. And that is troubling to me. This is a chronic, cancerous condition in the body of Messiah. It's prevalent. It is the most dominant state of mind in the body of Messiah today. And I oftentimes, like I spoke with somebody the other day, I said, I know what the end of the story says. The end of the story says, and the bride made herself ready. And I speak to Yahweh and I say, when is that going to happen? Because if I go by my natural eyes, the vast majority of people are not honest. They are inherently dishonest in their dealings with people. And yet, I won't go into the scriptures, but we're told that by Yeshua not to take the bread of what was it? I'm sorry. The bread of leaven, of insincerity, of the doctrine of the Pharisees. That's what it was. And that their doctrine was a doctrine of malice. And malice is evil doing against one another. And boy, I mean, you can just spread that out on a huge table and classify so many different areas. But everybody wants to say, oh, not me. I wouldn't be guilty of that. And they do that because they think nobody else sees what they're doing. And that's arrogance. And that's malice in itself. And it's self-righteousness. And that has no place in the body of Messiah. And I, for one, can hardly wait till we get to the point where Yeshua sits down and says, enough is enough. I'm separating the sheep from the goat. And then you're going to find out just who everybody really is, because all the unrighteousness that's going on in people's lives is going to come right out in the open for everybody to see. You got your hand in the cookie jar, you're going to get caught. Sooner or later, your time will come. And every time you get away with it, and you keep doing it, you get a little more emboldened to keep doing it, and sooner or later you set yourself up for disaster. I watched it 100 times. And so let's continue on. With a broken, humbled mind for you, do this in remembrance of me. Then in verse 25 it says, in the same manner he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup, which I found to be interesting in the Greek, is poterion, which is the cup of fate. Have you ever thought about it when you take the Passover cup with the wine, that you are literally drinking the cup of fate? That's the point of this message, about being honest with yourself. Are you in the faith or are you not? Because if your behaviors is such that you're doing things that is not ethical according to Scripture, you're not in the faith. Just because you show up on Sabbath doesn't mean you're in the faith. That is not the litmus test. But you're drinking the cup of fate. That means in that moment when that wine hits your lips and you ingest that blood, you have just now enacted fate into your life, dependent upon the state of mind you're in when you took of that blood. If you had a clear conscience and you came to grip with yourselves and you fixed all the foolishness that's going on inside your life, you can drink that cup with a pure conscience, knowing that whatever garbage that was going on in your life, you came clean with it. That blood, when it goes in, that blood cleanses everything that's all washed out. But if you're playing the game like so many are playing, you drink that cup. We're going to see where that's going to take you. It's going to take you down a road that is not going to make you happy. And eventually you go far enough down that road, you're right out of the body of Messiah. And you're right back out into the world. And you'll be twice as miserable as before you came into the Messiah. For as often as you eat this bread, unleavened bread, that is unleavened, and drink this cup of fate, you proclaim the Master's death till he comes. Remember, this is a contract. This is like if you sat down with somebody and you're going to go into business with them, and you got a contract in front of you, and he signs his name, and you sign your name, he's going to expect you to uphold every tenet of that contract, as well as you expecting them to uphold it as well. And so that contract is binding on both parties. Do we really see it that way when you drink the sip of that wine? What state of mind are you in? Are you honest with yourself? Remember, this is an exercise in honesty. Or is it just a ritual for you? Is it just a tradition? Is it, well, I kind of got away with all my foolishness last year, and there's no reason to believe, given what's happened in the past, that I won't get away with it this year too. So let me just go along with everybody what they're doing, because I know everybody else is a scoundrel also, so nobody got nothing on me, so we're all in the same boat. Because if that's your frame of mind, you're in a lot of trouble. And I would say, for me, I would respect a person who says, you know what, John? I'm in a lot of trouble. Please forgive me for not taking the Passover this year, because I have not come to grips with myself, and it's my own damn fault. And therefore, I'm going to sit this one out, and I'm going to try like hell for the next 30 days after this Passover to get cleaned up and get right. And please, can we take the second Passover together at that point? I have more respect for a person like that. Because that person's being honest. And this is an exercise in honesty, which is so sorely lacking in the body of Messiah. It's a downright shame. Because you know what it does? What it says is that the blood of Messiah cannot have enough power to clean us up. The blood doesn't have enough power to convict our conscience that we're playing a bunch of bullcrap games. And that looks bad on Messiah. Because he ain't got no power. He's a wimp. That's the implication. Because we're basically saying, I don't believe he has the power to straighten me up, or convict me, or cleanse me. So I'll continue on the same way as I did before I came into this faith. And I say, shame on you. So let's get into examining yourself. Verse 27. Therefore, and I want to stay here. This is not about condemnation, even though it sounds like it. That's not my point. My point is we need to get honest with ourselves before we can get honest with Yahweh, Yeshua, and anybody else. And if you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it. I'm not going to force anybody to do it. We're all grown adults, and those listening in within earshot of my voice are grown adults. Grow up! It's time to grow up and stop the games. I'm tired of watching this foolishness. And it comes very close to my house. And it ticks me off, and I have to keep my temper under control. Because I just want to take out a 2x4 and start whacking some heads and put some knots on people's heads. Because this is ridiculous, the stuff that kind of goes on that I see. And the rationalization adds more insult to injury to justify why it's okay to do what they do. And I'm saying, if you're guilty of that, don't take that Passover. Don't do it. Verse 27, therefore he eats this bread, artus, unleavened bread, or drinks this cup of fate of the master, is an unworthy, get this in the Greek, anaxios is the word, is irreverent and unfit. Think about that. You're irreverent and you're unfit. That means you should be institutionalized because you don't have the kind of mind that allows you to take of that cup. You are unfit. You need to be institutionalized because your mindset is as such, it's so hostile to the truth and why you're taking this cup that you have no business taking that cup. In essence, you've already cut yourself off from Messiah because your mind isn't working like Messiah's mind. Irreverent and unfit manner will be guilty in a state of liability, anachos in the Greek, in a state of liability of the body and blood of the master. Think about that. You're in a state of liability. When you're in a congregation, wherever you are, and you're in this state of mind, you are guilty. And you are in a state of liability against the body of Messiah that you attend, as well as the body of Yeshua himself, because he's the head. You have a moral obligation to conduct yourself in an ethical kind of way, a truthful way, with no malice. There should be no malice whatsoever in that body. And if you can't, get the hell out. You're in the wrong place. Go back to the Sunday church where they'll tolerate that stuff. Or maybe a Messianic congregation where it's anything goes. Nobody will hold you to account. You can play the games you want to play. You sit over there. They're okay with that. Just put money in the pot and we're not going to bother you. That's the game they play. And for some people, they'll never gravitate towards anything beyond that. Because they're comfortable with where they are. They're complacent. Verse 28. But let a man examine by testing to approve or disprove himself. See, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. You should be having enough maturity to know whether guilty as charged or not, if you have a conscience. If you don't have a conscience, this won't apply to you. Sooner or later, you'll be dealt with no matter what. But if you have a conscience, this is saying in the Greek that you should be able to test yourself to the point where you should be able to approve or disapprove of yourself. That's your responsibility. It's not my responsibility. It's our own responsibility. Each one is going to stand or fall on their own. You're not coming in on somebody else's coattails. Not anymore. You know, husband, wife, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, husband can get in, the wife doesn't. The wife get in, the husband doesn't. That's a personal choice, whether you get in alignment or not. Disapprove himself, and so let him eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For he who eats and drinks in an unworthy, irreverent, and unfit manner eats and drinks judgment as a criminal. That word judgment in Greek means criminal. If you are in that state, you are classified by Messiah as a criminal. How did you break in here? What are you doing in here? You are a trespasser, subject to being arrested and castigated. That's the way he looks at it. I guarantee you most people in the body of Messiah don't look at it that way, because they're busy justifying why they believe and do what they do. And that makes it okay. And after all, I've gotten away with it all these times. Why shouldn't it continue? Oh, okay. Boy, I've seen a lot of people over the years do that game. And I saw what happened to them. Eventually, it happens. Like Anthony said about a month ago, everybody going to get their chance to sit on the toilet. And then we're going to see what's in that bowl when they get up. Everybody going to get their chance. Been there, done that many times. Is a criminal to himself, not that me, or never discerning. So what it's saying is that this kind of a person never stops to really examine themselves and look at themselves and say, you know what, I'm in a lot of trouble. I got stinking thinking. The way I think is not in alignment with Messiah, and I'm in a lot of trouble. That Greek word means he never discerns. He isn't even going to entertain it. And why would a person not entertain it? Because they're not being led by the Ruach. Not from Yahweh's Ruach, which means you're being led by a different Ruach. And that Ruach does not want you to look at yourself. And that should be discernible. But oftentimes it's not. Because once a person's gone that far down the road, it's very difficult. And then it goes on to say not discerning or never discerning. The word discerning means because of its withdrawing from the master's body. Why? This person got in that state of mind because little by little they've been withdrawn from the master's body. Now that's Yahshua himself, and it is the body of Messiah, the congregation you were in. Little by little, your lobster is being cooked. One temperature level at a time, that pot is boiling more and more and more to the point that that lobster is getting cooked. But it happens so gradually, and it encroaches on you, and it sneaks up on you so subtly that you don't realize how far down that road you've already gone. But you're there. And it came because you didn't even stop to discern that you were already in the process of withdrawing from the master's body. Which is why we do Passover every year, in part, is to reconnect you to his blood. And the seriousness of reconnecting with that contract that you said when you got baptized and you went under that water, you said, I am going to drown this old person that's inside of me. That old person's alive and well in most people. I'll even say myself in some ways. But there's a difference between having the old person there fighting to resuscitate himself and you doing nothing about it and you're letting him live and gain his oxygen back where he dominates you, versus somebody who says, get back down in the water. Get back down in that water. Don't come up out of that water. And you have this struggle going all the time that you're trying to hold his head under the water. Two different kind of people altogether. Not the same. They're miles apart in their philosophy. Verse 30. For this reason, many are weak, and that's asthenio, which means feeble and diseased. Many of us are feeble and diseased because of this state. I tell you the truth. Many times I hurt. Sometimes I can't tell if I hurt because my diet's not good. Sometimes I can't tell if I'm hurting because I'm just getting to be an older guy, and I've never experienced it before. But they tell me when I look at other older people that things start to go downhill, So it's a natural thing that things wind down. So I don't know if it's that, or I don't know, sometimes maybe I'm not seeing things spiritually in a way that's correct. And maybe I'm reaping some consequences in the flesh for things I'm doing in the spirit or in the natural, that I'm reaping consequences for that. And it gets hard to tell sometimes. So you start popping vitamins and supplements and natural drinks, and then the conditions still don't go away. Then it's like, okay, well, I guess it's not that. So I'm left with either I'm just an old man that ain't nothing can be done about it, or I'm reaping some spiritual stuff, from the attitudes that I've got. And so I'm sick and tired all the time, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, and financially. So let's move. And sick among you, and many sleep or die. So some people have this condition so bad to the point that they die. So the point here is, if you're honest with yourself in this examination, you theoretically should not find yourself in this kind of predicament. But some of us are gluttons for punishment. And we just have been so trained by this world to continue behaving the same way in the body of Messiah that we behave when we're outside the body of Messiah, before we came to Yeshua. Verse 31, for if we would judge, and that's diakrino, by separating and withdrawing ourselves. Separating and withdrawing ourselves. There's times I can remember in my life where I got so busy being so involved with the congregations that I was in, with so many activities, I didn't have time to withdraw myself and get away from all that social stuff so that I have time to reflect on my life and am I okay or am I not okay? And I thought by being busy and serving, doing this and serving and doing that somehow that put me on the good list with Yahweh. Not necessarily. Nobody's justified by their works in that kind of way. And so you can do stuff, you can be so busy in this life to the point that you don't have time to stop and discern where you're at. Especially before we come to Passover. Withdrawing ourselves, we would not be judged, krino, and sued at the Torah as condemned. Whoa. That's strong language. From Yahweh's perspective, if you don't judge yourself, He views you as a criminal and you to be sued at the Torah and as condemned. That means you're marked for death. Remember the story, the movie with Steven Seagal, Marked for Death? If you ever saw him, I like his movie. He's pretty cool. But you're marked for death. That's the road you're going down. You're marked for death. So now He has to take you to court and institute mishpat, which is judgment based on Torah principles of where you're guilty, and start coming after you and prosecuting you on that to try to get your attention so that you can be honest with yourself. I've gone too far. Stop it. Stop it. Knock it off. But if you don't listen and you continue down that road, your fate will be sealed because you drank that cup and you refuse to change your mind and be honest with yourself. And that fate is to be condemned. That means if you were a believer and you go to your grave in that state, you will come up in the third resurrection. That means you go to the lake of fire for the second death, and you're done. You won't even be a part of history the way Yahweh writes that. Nobody will ever remember your name through history. You'll be completely forgotten. Maybe your unsaved loved ones, when they come up in the second resurrection, accept Yeshua and they become a spirit being, they won't even remember that you ever was their child. Can you imagine that? That's how insignificant you become when you let yourself get into this state of mind. All because we don't want to be honest. It's time for the body of Messiah to start growing up and stop this terrible twos mentality that we have. We're going to throw temper tantrums. We're going to grip the ground and we're going to say, this is my way and I don't care who thinks about me and this and that and the other. You're in trouble, man. You're already marked for condemnation. You're on that road. That's where you're going. Verse 32. But when we are judged and called into question, this is kind of a different word, judge. It's krino. It means and called into question. Have you ever been called out by somebody for something? They caught you in something and they called you out. That's kind of the gist of what this word is being used as. We are chastened and disciplined for the purpose of education. That's what that word means in the Greek. The point is not to condemn. Yahweh doesn't want to condemn us. He wants to educate us. Stop this behavior. It's taking you somewhere that's not good for you. And it's not good for anybody that's around you. By the master, that we may not be condemned. See, so this is the first step. The first step is, I want to educate you. I'm going to keep chastening you for the purpose of educating you. But at some point, if I can't get through to that thick skull of yours, that coconut shell in there that you can't break open, then I'm going to just mark you for condemnation. Because now you're part of the incorrigibly wicked. You will not change. It's because you don't want to. You want to serve a different master, which is the master of this world, which goes on to say that you may not be condemned and judged against with the world. See, the world's going to be put in that category, condemnation. They're condemned. That's why Yeshua says, I didn't come to condemn the world, I came to save it. You're already under condemnation. I came to get you out of that. But if you won't let me do it, and if you won't do it by faith, then you can't please me. Then I mark you for death. Okay, so then now that we've kind of exhausted that a little bit, so what should our mind be? As a contrast, what should our mind be? Let's go to Psalms chapter 51, and let's take a look at King David and what he went through in a scenario where he went with Bathsheba. And let's look at his dialogue with Yahweh. Psalm 51, starting in verse 1. He says, have mercy, Hanan, as to bend down in kindness to an inferior one. So he's asking Yahweh, I'm inferior, you're superior. Can you please bend down to help me? I'm in trouble. I'm inferior. I can't come close to you. Please reach down in humility and pick me up. Help me. I'm in trouble. Upon me, O Elohim, according to your loving kindness, according to the multitude of your tender mercies, Racham, as a woman who cherishes a fetus in her womb. That's what it means in the Hebrew. Now, mostly it's only a woman that can really understand that. I don't proclaim to really understand it. I understand the concept, but, you know, as a man, you've never had something living inside of you in that kind of way, so it's really hard for a man to understand it, but the point is being made. Then he goes on to say, blot out, maja, to erase and make smooth as oil. So if you took your finger and you rubbed it on oil, how smooth it is, you know. They use it on machines and gears and stuff so that you reduce the friction. And that's the mindset it's trying to get across. My transgressions. So I've got transgressions, but please smooth them out. Make them very smooth so they're not so rough and hard. Make it easier for me to deal with. That are a rebellious revolt. So the word transgressions means pisha, which is that are a rebellious revolt. Now, we don't really look at it that when we do wrong, it's a rebellious revolt. But if you really sit down and think about it, in the moment you decided to take on the nature that you took on, that was a rebellious revolt. You, whether it's subconscious or conscious or not, you decided you were going to listen to that spirit versus the one that was leading you before that. And as soon as you gave into that spirit, that became a revolt. Because now you're serving that master, you're not serving this master. As Yeshua says, no man can serve two masters. You either love one and you hate the other. That's it. You can't serve two masters. You're either going to do one or you're going to do the other. And that's it. And this world is pushing us more and more to the point where many of us are getting to a breaking point where you have to make a decision. And it's a life-altering, defining moment when you get to that point to make that decision. Because it really comes down to a decision. I refuse to behave in an unethical, lying manner anymore. I'm not going to do it. I will be truthful. There will not be any more malice on my tongue. It's a decision. It's the same as, I'm going to get out of bed this morning. I'm going to get dressed. I'm going to have breakfast. I'm going to go to work. Was that not a decision? You could have said, I'm just going to stay in bed the heck with my boss. That's another decision. This has this set of consequences. This one has that set of consequences. You will deal with the consequences. But, if you honor your boss, which is what you're supposed to be doing, then you will go to work and you will make the personal sacrifice to serve your boss and do what you're supposed to do, as if you were doing it to the Messiah Yeshua himself, as Scripture says. Or you can be innately selfish and say, I'm going to be lazy today, and I'm going to sit at home, and I really don't much care what kind of problems I create for them. Okay. You have free moral agency. You can choose to do whatever you want to do. But you also choose the consequences that come along with it. Verse 2, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, Pesha, that is rebellious revolt, and cleanse, Tahir, to a Levitically uncontaminated brightness. That's in the Hebrew. That word cleanse means to a Levitically uncontaminated brightness. So we begin to see how David is thinking and how he's pleading with Yahweh. This is where I want to go. I'm not there right now because I've done some really bad stuff. But I see what I did wrong. I'm examining myself. I can't get there from here without you. Please bend down and help me as a pathetic human being in this state, and help me to get to this state of brightness. Do we ask ourselves that? And if we do, are we like the man that looks in the mirror and sees what kind of man he is, and he walks away, and 5 minutes later you're back to the old plan again? You were never really convicted in the first place, were you? There's something about human beings that I find fascinating. They can't stand to look at themselves and admit to themselves that you're miserable, wretched, poor, blind, and naked, just like Yeshua said in Revelation chapter 3. That is the Laodicean spirit. That is the last end of days spirit that will be permeating many in the body of Messiah. It's alive and well now. Poor, blind, miserable, and naked. Can you truly say that of yourself? Or does that scare the living daylights out of you? Most people don't want to visit that because it scares them. They don't have the humility to admit that that's how I am. And then the next logical step is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to do what David's doing? Or are you going to take the chicken way out, the way of the world, and insult the Messiah and go back out there and continue the same stuff that you were doing before? Let's continue on. Uncontaminated brightness in me from my sin, kata, that is habitual. So that word means it's habitual sin. It's something you keep doing over and over again, and you're compelled to do it, and it's a compulsory disorder, and you can't even get to the point saying, I have got a compulsory disorder. I don't know where it came from. That's okay. You don't have to know where it came from initially. The question is, can you admit you have a compulsory disorder? Well, no, because that would say that I'm mentally disturbed. You are mentally disturbed. Because that comes from the devil. That's what mentally disturbed people do. People who are in the body of Messiah are not mentally disturbed or emotionally disturbed. Look, can we get real about this? Can we see the Passover as something completely different than maybe how we've seen it before when you approach the Passover? This is an examination in honesty. At the end of this, I will have said what I said. And people will either say, you know what? He's right. I got to get real with myself. I got to stop this foolishness. And others are going to say, that don't apply to me. I'm just fine. It's not my problem. I'm just a voice speaking what I feel Yahweh is giving me to speak. It's about being honest. It's always about being honest. Your word is your bond. If you're misleading people and deceiving people, it is wrong. That is malice. That is wickedness. That is evil to do that. And you don't have a legal right to do it. I don't have a right. I try everything I can to make sure that whatever words come out of my mouth to somebody is completely as pure as I understand it. I never intentionally mislead a person. Because I know what happens to me when I do. And I'm tired of that after 35 years. I mean, I generally wasn't that kind of person to begin with. So to me, it's a foreign way of thinking. That doesn't make me better than anybody else. I'm just saying I'm coming from it from that angle. Let's move on. Verse 3. For I acknowledge my transgressions, Pesha, which is revoltiveness, and my sin is always before me. So this thing's like constantly nagging at him. It's constantly haunting him. And it's bothering him. It's like, man, I can't shake this thing off. It's like glued to me. It's stuck with me. It follows me wherever I go. And it's frustrating because it won't leave you alone. Which then tells me that it has a legal right to be there. It could be from generational curses. It could be from some agreement you made somewhere along the line that has attached itself to, it could come from any number of reasons. But the point is that it has a legal right to be there, and that bondage, that stronghold needs to be broken. So you can be free to serve Yahweh with honesty the way it was designed in the first place. But if you don't remove the stronghold stays, even if Yahweh's in your life. It just means you're going to be severely impaired in that part of your life. You will not be able to function in that part of your life. Which means you cause a part of the body of Messiah to become crippled. Because you're not an asset, you are a liability, marked for death. If you don't change it. If you don't at least show a willingness to change it. So let's take a hypothetical. All of a sudden one day you get an epiphany. I'm guilty of such and such. I want to do something about this. And you pray, you fast, you do everything you can. Yahweh helps you, and you get better and better at it. But let's say the day that you die, you stay in the faith, you never fell from the faith, and you've been working on this thing all these years, and you only get up to 75% of conquering it. That's okay. Theoretically, what I'm saying is that's okay. You didn't get to the 100% of conquering it. The point is you fought it your whole life. You took an active role in confronting this thing in your life, and you went at it with gusto, with vigor, and you wanted it out of your life. You detested this thing. You can't stand the fact that it's there, versus the other person says, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm okay. That one's in danger of the judgment. Because he never lifted a pinky to even attempt to examine himself that he has a fault. Against you, verse 4, only have I sinned and done this evil in your sight, that you may be found just when you speak, and blameless, which means zakah, which is translucent. That means whatever Yahweh says about you, it is 100% translucent. There is no aberration in that whatsoever. There's no speck of dishonesty in any of that statement. It is 100% translucent. It is perfectly clear. There's no fault in it whatsoever. That's what it's trying to get across. When you judge. Verse 5. Behold, I was brought forth in a twisting and whirling pain and iniquity. So it tormented him. And in sin my mother conceived me. Verse 6. Behold, you desire truth in the inward parts. And in the hidden katham, to keep secret part, you will make me known to know wisdom. So if you ask him, he will give you wisdom. That's what Solomon asked for. He will give you the wisdom. He wants to know, do you really care that you're in this state of mind? And if you don't give a damn, then in essence, he doesn't give a damn. You will just meet your fate at the end of the road. But if you do give a damn, and you really, really want to fight against your flesh and give him the power to help you to overcome your flesh and your stinking thinking, he will empower you to do it. And believe me, it's a lot easier than people think. I think people are paranoid at challenging themselves because they're afraid of where it's going to take them. It's the spirit of fear. But the spirit of fear just causes torment. It's perfect love that casts out all fear. So you lack perfect love. And you don't have a properly placed fear. You're fearing yourself and where it may go, and you're not fearing Yahweh, who what the heck he's going to do to you if you don't change this state of mind. That's what you should really be fearing. I'm in a lot of trouble. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean, tahir, to a Levitically uncontaminated brightness. Wash, as to be stamping with feet in a full process of me. So in other words, apparently what I got from looking into it is when they wash clothes, they would wash clothes by stamping on it with their feet to really agitate the fibers to get all the dirt out of it. It's an aggressive form of washing versus just kind of soaping it up a little bit and putting it in the water. Maybe the garment was not that dirty and it's not necessary for that. But when a garment is really dirty and it's stained heavily and the fibers are impregnated with all kinds of dirt that won't come out with just a simple washing of water and soap, you have to get with your feet on and stamp it. This is what he's saying, the state of mind that he's in. He's being honest. I don't know how you can be more honest than that. I'm pathetic. I'm in a lot of trouble. I don't need just a general washing. I need you to get on top of me and stamp me aggressively with your feet. Because if you don't, and I don't get shaken out of this thing, I'm done. And I can't do it on my own. I don't have the righteousness. I don't have the power. I don't have the know-how. I don't have the clout to do this on my own. None of us do. It's not about that anyway. All you can do is give him your free will based upon your honesty in examining yourself that I am messed up. You have to admire an alcoholic who's been drinking for many years when he finally gets an epiphany one day and he says, you know what? He finally admits, I'm an alcoholic. That is the first moment of his cleansing right there. It's not stopping the drinking. It's admitting that I am guilty. I am an alcoholic. Because the next logical conclusion should be for him, and many are, I'm going to AAA and I'm going to get cleaned up. And I'm going to be held accountable by my peers to watch over to make sure that I don't fall. How many of us do that? I've been an open book for the last year. I've spilt all my guts out about all my issues and stuff like that. I'm an open book. But many are not. And that's to your own detriment if you want to go down that road. It's to your own detriment. And all that says is you have a lot of pride. And you're not pleasant about what's going on in your life. And you don't want anybody to know about it. Okay, then you're not honest. I'm just saying it like it is. And I feel I have a higher moral authority to be able to say it because I don't conceal what goes on in my life. I'm not saying you have to say everything about your life. There are some things that need to be left behind your door. But I'm just talking about in general. You know, I think you catch my drift. So purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean to a Levitically uncontaminated brightness. Wash as to be stamping with feet in a full process of me, and I shall be whiter than snow. So after all that stamping and aggressive stamping and cleansing, when that garment comes out, it's as white as snow. Painful. It's aggressive. But it works. Verse 8, make me hear, Shema, with intelligence, joy and gladness, which is Simcha, which means like at one of the feast days. So that kind of Simcha is like, if you've been privileged to go to the feast, it's an exciting time. Because you're going there to celebrate the feast, and you're away from the world and away from your responsibilities, and you're there to have a really good time, you know, and so forth, and celebrate and learn and all kinds of meet new people and stuff like that. That's the kind of feast that it's talking about. That the bones you have broken may rejoice. So here we go to that chastisement part. He felt like his bones were broken. Sometimes I feel that's just maybe what I'm feeling, is that the pressure keeps on me all the time, because if he don't keep the pressure on me, I get relaxed. That's a flaw in my nature. I tend to get relaxed. Can I please get a break? I want to go lay my head down for a little bit. No, you're going to get up and you're going to go do this and that and the other. But I'm tired. I don't care you're tired. You need to get up and go do this. So I feel like I'm on constant pressure, because if he lets up too much, I will get relaxed because I want a break. Even an ox says, can you please take me to the water hole and let me get some water? Or let me get a snippet of grass off to the side because I'm a little hungry from walking in the hot sun all day long. And, you know, he does give those moments, but he's got a job to do. He has an agenda. In each and every one of us as individuals, as well as establishing his kingdom on the earth and teaching us to be kings and priests who will serve in that kingdom. Time is short. We're not on this earth very long. There's a lot to learn. And whatever you demand of yourself is what Yahweh will push you to. But remember this, there are times where Yahweh knows that you can reach a higher potential than what you believe you can, and he's going to push you. And he's going to force you. And then he's going to watch whether you're going to buck and scream and yell and complain and moan and groan as the typical stiff-necked, rebellious Israelite, or you're going to say, yes, well, I'll be about your business. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. This flesh takes a beating. It really takes a beating. Okay, so it goes on to say, rejoice, to spin around under a violent emotion. That's what it means. That kind of rejoicing is like, let's say, for example, right now they got, Publishers Clearinghouse is doing this thing on the TV. Get $7,000 a week for the rest of your life. Can you imagine if you're sitting quietly at home and all of a sudden a van pulls up to the front of your house, you know, and all of a sudden these cameras come out and these people come out with a big check, printed out on a big poster board, and they bang on your door and they say, hey, Tom, you just won $7,000. You'd be spinning around in that living room, and you've already figured out where you're going to spend the money on and all that kind of stuff. Come on, let's face it. You would be spinning around. That's the kind of violent emotion that he's talking about in verse 9. Hide your face from my sins and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O Elohim, and renew Kadash, which means to rebuild. Now, you can only rebuild if what you had before was broken down. So it's never too late. It's never too late. Rebuild a steadfast spirit within me. So he's saying that I had that at one point, but I lost it through this process. It happens. We're human beings. Don't be that hard on yourself that just because you messed up, you can't return back. Sure you can. You just want to do it before you breathe your last. That's the important part. Verse 11. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your Ruach HaKodesh from me. Verse 12. Restore, Shub, to my starting point. So he says, bring me back again. Remember those good days when we were working together and you were blessing me and I was going out and winning all these wars for Israel and, you know, all the great things that he was doing. Restore me back to that starting point. I miss that. I don't like being where I am. This is not fun. I want to go back to the glory days. To me, the joy of your salvation. Yesha, deliverance and prosperity. So the word salvation is Yesha, which means deliverance and prosperity. So not only is he being delivered from the state of mind that he's in, but once he's delivered, then the prosperity returns. And it hold me in your generous spirit. Then I will teach, lamad, as to goad them in a skillful manner, the transgressors. I found that interesting, that word goad, because I did a teaching recently, are you kicking against the goads? So what he's saying here is, we'll go on, you'll see the transgressors, Pasha, who break away from just authority of your ways, which is a mode of lifestyle, and sinners who are counted as guilty criminals shall be converted. So what he's saying is, if you'll just bring me back to the time where I was strong like I used to be, and then I'm going to be like a goad, and I'm going to stick these sinners who are behaving like heathens in the ankle and hurt them to the point that they'll get tired of that and they'll return back and they'll become righteous also. But he knows that in the state of mind he's in, he can't do that. He doesn't have the higher authority, moral authority, to do that. And there are times in our lives when we've fallen, we're in a place where we don't have the higher moral authority. You better keep your mouth shut. You're the one that needs the correcting. And then when you get yourself straightened out and you return back to the state of strength, then you have the moral authority to do what you got to do. You got to know that. You can't go beyond your measure. You got to know what is your measure. All of us have got to know what our measure is. So converted and brought back to the starting point to you. 14. Deliver, Natsal, to snatch and pluck me from the guilt of bloodshed, O Elohim, the Elohim of my salvation, and the tongue shall sing aloud of your righteousness. Verse 15. The sovereign open my lips, and my mouth shall show forth your praise. For you do not desire sacrifice of an animal, or else I would give it. You do not delight in burnt offering. The sacrifices of Elohim are what? A broken and crushed spirit. Is your spirit crushed before this Passover with the nonsense that you have been indulging in? And if you're going to sit here, or anybody who hears my voice says, not guilty as charged, you're a hypocrite and you're a liar, because we all have something that we are guilty of. We all do. None of us can say, because if that's the case, then you don't need to come to the Passover table. You're perfect. You're righteous. You don't need the blood. You don't need the bread, the body. You're perfect. We have the Messiah in the flesh in front of us. So it's about being honest. We're all guilty of something. Some of it is willful. Some of it is through ignorance. Some of it is because we have demonic strongholds inside of us that we haven't come to recognize yet and understand, much less know how to get rid of it, how to pray against it. And so there are different reasons why these things happen. Let's continue. A broken and a contrite dakah that causes a physical and mental collapse of the heart. Oh, that's a hard place to be. How many of us can get there? How many of us have been there? And if you did get there, was it a change that lasted? Or did you go right back to where, like David, find himself where he's back in trouble again? These, O Elohim, you will not despise. See, that's the state of mind he wants. Not what we read up there in Corinthians about drinking judgment to yourself. This is a different mindset. This is a mindset where he's taking it very serious, the position that he's in, that if he don't straighten himself out and seek some real serious help, he's in trouble. Let's go to Matthew chapter 6, verse 6. Say, okay, John, I got it, I understand. So what do I do? Well, let's start by, let's praying in this way. Verse 6, Matthew 6, 6. But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to the Father who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. And when you pray, do not use vain repetitions as the heathen do. How many of us get into a rut with prayer? You know, oh, Abba Father, I present myself before you today. I just want to bless your name. And while you're saying this stuff, you know, you're going on and you're saying, I pray that you forgive me of my sins. I pray for my brothers and sisters. I pray that you bless me this week in my work. And while you're praying that, the other part of your mind is saying, you foolish individual. You know that your heart ain't in this prayer. You know you ain't praying what you're supposed to be praying. You know that your Father already knows what you have need of these things before you even ask, so why are you wasting this time? And so you got this double mental state that's going on. One thing is coming out of your mouth, but in your heart you're saying you're being hypocritical. And you're not praying in faith, and you're not really convicted about what you're praying anyway. It's very monotone. And so you're wasting your time. You might as well get dressed and go to work. Don't bother the Father until you say, you know what? I need to really get on my knees and I need to pray in a serious manner because I'm in a lot of trouble. I have not been honest with myself and I need to get right. And this is not a thing to be playing with. And if I am playing with it, I need to get out if I'm not going to be sincere about it. I need to get out. And maybe I need to be out for a while. And maybe I need to get my keister kicked out there in the world for a while, like David did. Until he gets so beaten up and his heart so crushed and broken into pieces. And he's been experienced such massive pain to the point that he can't take it anymore, that now he needs Yahweh to really come down on top of him and straighten him out. Sometimes we need that. I did it a few times. I just checked out. It's like going to the grocery store, you lay your stuff on the counter, pay for it, I check out. I'm out of here. It's not a fun place to be because you didn't get there overnight, you know, when that happens. You started down that road when you decided, I'm not going to examine myself. I'm not even going to consider the possibility that there's anything wrong with me. And so because you weren't honest with yourself, that was the moment you made a decision to go down that road that's going to lead you out the checkout. And you check out. You will check out. I guarantee you, you will. If those who think that they're not going to check out, that you will check out. I've watched it so many times. And as Solomon says, there's nothing new under the sun. What happens to one man happens to another. You're nothing special. It is the nature of how this stuff works. And when you pray, do not use vain repetition as the heathens do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Therefore, do not be like them, for your Father knows the things you have need of before you even ask him. In this manner, as to what will now follow, that's what the word manner means. Therefore, pray, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom of royal rule come. Your will be done on this earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, which again is that word artos. Give us the showbread, the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Isn't that what Yeshua said? And forgive us our debts as we forgive others of our debtors. Verse 13. And do not lead from our inward parts of us into temptation when we are solicited by evil. We're always being solicited in some kind of way. Sometimes knowingly, sometimes not knowingly. But deliver us from the evil, that is the degeneracy from the original virtue. So what is he saying? What he's saying is that when you were delivered to the Messiah, You were given original virtue. So when an evil solicitation comes, its whole job function or criteria is to remove that original virtue or power from you and bring you to be disempowered. That's what it's saying. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Verse 14. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. So in conclusion, this business about coming to the Master's table for the Passover is a very, very serious matter. And it behooves every one of us to be very, very careful to take that seriously. And if you don't know how to take it seriously, ask Yahweh to show you how to remove that which blinds you from that process so that you can see. Because until you can see it, you're blind. You're like a drunk bouncing off the walls in a dark alley late at night. You're incoherent. You don't know where you're going. And you certainly don't know where it's going to take you. In Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 11, talks about acting in deceitfulness. This is all part of the malice and the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth, that we should be striving for, and not the doctrine of the Pharisees, which is the spirit of malice. And deceitfulness surely falls into that. So in Acts chapter 5, verse 1, it says, But a certain man named Ananias, which is of Hebrew origin, with Sapphira, which means sapphire, as is also an Israelitess, his wife, sold a possession. Sold a possession. Verse 2, and he kept back through embezzlement. The word kept back means embezzlement in the Greek. So this is serious, because these two are conspiring with each other to do deceitfulness against the body of Messiah, against their fellow brothers and sisters. Parts of the proceeds, his wife also being aware and conscious of it, and brought a certain part and laid it at the apostles', which is an ambassador for the gospel with a miraculous powers, feet. Verse 3, But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie, to deceive through falsehood to the Ruach HaKodesh, and keep back part of the price of your land for yourself? Why? So he wants to know the motive. What was his motive? He's giving him a chance. Perhaps maybe to come clean. Be honest. Did he recognize what he was doing? What was his motive? Why were you behaving this way? While it remained, was it not your own? So what he's basically telling him is, you could have came to us and said, listen, I have this land for a certain amount that I could sell for a certain amount of money to help the fellowship. Can I please keep back 20% of it, because my wife and I really need it for this and that and the other? And they would have agreed to that. Yeah. I think they would have. At least they were being honest about it. But if you really think about it, the reason why he probably didn't bring it up is because they were probably afraid, here we go, that fear again, that the fellowship would look upon them in an unfavorable light, that they were being greedy and wanting to keep back some of the money for themselves. It could have that appearance. It may be totally legitimate. But they probably were fearful. They didn't want people feeling that way towards them. But where that road going to take them is not very good. While it remained, was it not your own? And after it was sold, was it not in your own control? Why then have you conceived this thing in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to Elohim. Then Ananias, hearing these words, fell down and breathed his last. So apparently he didn't give a response, which means guilty as charged. So great fear fell upon those who heard these things. Verse 6. And the young men arose, wrapped him up as a corpse for a burial of him up, carried him out, and buried him. Now it was about 3 hours later when his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. And Peter answered, where an address was expected of her. So in other words, he addressed her in such a way that he's questioning her with the idea that he's going to get a response. I expect a response from you. Didn't get one from the husband, but I expect a response from you. Tell me whether you sold the land for so much. She said, yes. And it wasn't just a yes, because in the Greek it emphasizes it this way. It's nahi in the Greek, means in a strong affirmation. Yes, for so much. Like she was proud of it. That's the way she really responded. It was like arrogance, so to speak. Then Peter said to her, how is it that you have agreed so harmoniously in such a compact together to test, tempt, and scrutinize the ruach of a master? Look, the feet of those who buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out also. Wow. Then immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last, and the young men came and found her dead, and carrying her out, buried her by her husband. So great fear came upon all the called out ones, and upon all who heard these things. So severe consequences for being deceitful. In them days, that's the first account that I know of, not long after them receiving the power of the Spirit, where these things were happening. And obviously Yahweh wanted to make a point. You're not going to be in the body of Messiah and play these kind of games. There will be consequences for them. Now, we generally, I don't think I've ever heard of that happen in this dispensation, but I really believe that as we get closer and closer to the end, we're going to see these powerful things start to happen again. Because Yahweh's going to be separating the sheep from the goat more and more and more. And we're going to start to find out exactly who is really who. And I include myself. I'm not saying I'm an angel. I could easily fall at any time into these things. And that scares me. Because I do not want to be in that place. I've seen too many people who found themselves in that place and where it took them. And I don't want to find myself there. So I already know how that works. I know where it goes. So a word to the wise should be sufficient. Verse 17. Therefore, I'm sorry, I didn't read. James chapter 4, verse 17. Let's take a look real quick at sin and the nature of sin. James 4:17. Therefore, to him who knows to do good, that is morally virtuous and proper, that's what that means, and does not do it, to him it is a sin. If Yahweh's Spirit is speaking to you, and he's telling you, right about now, you only got so many days left before the Passover, and you're guilty of this, and you're guilty of this, and you're guilty of that, and you're in a whole lot of trouble. And he's telling you what you need to do, and you refuse to do it, that is a sin because you don't do it. Because that's rebellion. Because you're basically saying, I won't do it. Which means you're serving yourself. 3 John 11. 3 John 11. Right. 3 John 11. Let's look at this evil real quick. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, which is depraved and injurious, but what is good. He who does good is of Elohim, but he who does evil has not seen Elohim. That ties in with what I just read. If you refuse to do the good, then you cannot see Elohim. And you're playing religion. That's all you're doing. You're taking up a seat and you're playing religion. You're not authentic. So I'm hoping let's take a better look at what this Passover means for you as an individual. Not just collectively, but as an individual. In your own personal life. In your own struggles and your own strengths. What does this Passover mean to me? This Passover should be, as all of them should be, an exercise in honesty. Can you and are you willing to take the first step in being honest with yourself before you drink of that cup? Because that cup is the cup of fate. And you'll go down either this road or you'll go down that road. The decision is yours. It relies strictly on you. You're a grown adult. You've been in this long enough to know what is right and what is wrong. What is honest, what is dishonest. What you should choose to go to the right or choose to go to the left. Nobody's going to make you do anything. Yahweh's not going to make you do anything. This is your responsibility for yourself, not for anybody else. This is a relationship between you and the Master Yahshua. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. We see in the Torah, Yahweh says for Israel, today I have laid before you life and death. Choose life. Amen?
Amen.
Let's close in prayer. Abba, Father, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, we bless you and thank you for these encouraging words, Abba, that is never, ever, ever too late, as we saw with King David, that no matter how far down the road we can get, that's a bad road, Abba, you can bring us back. But it's up to us to decide we desire it, Abba. We have to decide we don't like being miserable anymore. We have to decide I can't sleep at night because I am not being honest with myself, I'm not being honest with you, and I'm not being honest with other people. This is tormenting to me, Abba, and I want to be cleansed. I give you permission, like David said. Stomp on me like a garment in the water that needs to be washed of its filth. Stomp on me with all the power that you need to have, but with mercy, that you may cleanse my garments, that I may come out as uncontaminated and as bright as a Levitical priest that you have sanctified and set apart. For that, Abba, only you, through Yeshua's blood, can accomplish that. We just give you the power and the authority to do it before this day comes up on the Passover, that we may be justified and truly cleansed when that blood goes into our system. We thank you. We bless you for this Sabbath day and your encouraging words of instruction, Yahweh, in Yeshua's mighty name. Amen.
Amen.